This podcast is part of the Zeo to Hero Podcast Network.
AvenuePodcast.net.
Hello, all my beautiful people. It's time for another fun episode of If You Give a Dad a Podcast, and I just want to say thank you and welcome to those that are here to listen to this week's episode. Whether this is your first time being here or if you're a long-term listener, I really appreciate you being here and hearing these episodes that I bring to you, and I hope that you enjoy them as much as I do recording them. So this week's guest is a voice actor. I've had a few on, but this one's really cool. He is the voice of Beerus in Dragon Ball Super. He was also Tobin in The Walking Dead. He was on 25 episodes, I believe, of The Walking Dead. He was in No Country for Old Men. He was in Secondhand Lions. He was in all kinds of different things. He was in my favorite anime also. So I think this is going to be a great episode. We really hit it off, had a great conversation, and kind of just talked about just a little bit of everything. And I'm really sure that you guys are going to enjoy this too. And for those of you who are here just to listen to the Jason Douglas episode, welcome. I hope that you enjoy what you hear, and I hope that you stick around and listen to some of the other great episodes I have here as well. So, if you guys are as excited as I am, then let's get this show on the road.
If You Give a Dad a Podcast.
You're bloody welcome!
You know?
Hey, Dad.
If I get my hand stuck in a pickle jar, I'm straight up bull in a china shop, just swinging around.
Started writing songs when I was about 12 or so.
Seriously?
They're retrofitting me now, and
I'm like, yes, finally.
I've also had the opportunity to go train with Hoist Gracie and Dan Severin.
Wow.
I like that. That's different. Stands out.
That day I took my very first bump and it was fun.
There's only one section to go to first.
Yeah.
Toys.
Bro.
I was like, no, man, surely this guy's not worked out that long.
I haven't laughed that hard since I was a little girl.
What?
Man, this guy won't shut up.
And just a reminder before we get started here, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to iGadap wherever it is you're listening to. Hit that notification bell so you are notified when a new episode drops. Also, make sure that you go out there and rate and review this episode. Tell me what you think of it. And the more people that do that, the more likely I am to be recommended to somebody else. Now, on to the show. All right, everybody. So I am really stoked about this one. This is one that I've been trying to plan out for a few months and finally got this going. It is a guy that is out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He is a film, television, and voice actor. He's very well known for being in The Walking Dead, being part of Dragon Ball Super as Lord Beerus, and lots of other stuff. He's also part of Chainsaw Man and Borderlands 2. I am talking about Jason Douglas, and I'm very excited. Man, how are you doing today?
Hey, man, I'm good. I'm just our little mini snowmageddon here in North Texas. I'm not exactly having to dig out, but yeah, we got a little overnight blanket. But we're good, man. Yeah, it's a good start to the year. So
yeah, we had some really low temperatures here. I think right now it says that the real feel is like -10 where I'm at, and had salt to drive away and everything. But yeah, mini snowmageddon, like you said.
Well, we're just not planning on going anywhere, so
right. Yeah,
I'm gonna give it a day or two before I get antsy. Start tossing the salt.
Well, it's my job. They gave us today off because Martin Luther King Day and everything. Sure. So it kind of worked out. I didn't have to worry about getting out in this to go to work or anything. So it, I was kind of blessed to have that happen. For sure. Yeah, kids are out of school today too. So yes, they are. Yeah. So I got my daughter running around out there and stuff, and she's she's trying to figure out if she's going to be out of school tomorrow too, because the roads did get pretty bad. I mean, the trash didn't even run today, so
yeah, here either. And for the kids, it's almost like Christmas again.
Yeah,
suddenly they're up early, they're begging to go out, and it's going to be in and out all day.
Yeah.
I'm so cold, I'm ready to go back. It's the house is filthy by the end of the day, of course.
Oh yeah.
That's just how it is.
It is. It's all good.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on your show. I don't know if we met in person at a show at some point, and that's how we met. But I thought the name of your podcast was kind of funny. So that's, being a fellow dad, I kind of get it, you know.
Yeah. Well, my wife actually named it. I kind of told her what I wanted to do with the show.
Sure.
And she was like, kind of like if you give a mouse a cookie, you know, anything can happen on there. Sure. So, you know, and that's what I wanted. I wanted a show where I didn't get nailed down to just one type of thing. I could have, you know, any type of person on there that I want.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Well, we'll kind of get started into this. You know, I've got some questions up here for you, and we'll just kind of jump into that. So when was it that you kind of realized that this was what you wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a good question to start with. You know, I was in high school and had done some work in our high school theater, and I don't always, you know, mention this, but it is relevant. I went to a high school that had a really strong theater program, and we had a couple of guys that went on to be pretty well known. You know, sort of, I don't know. I feel like it was well before I sort of, you know, became, you know, carved out my own little niche.
Right.
But like Jim Parsons, if you know Jim from obviously the Big Bang Theory, and another actor named Charlie Pollock. He's not so well known, but he's a kind of Broadway guy, lives up in the New York area. So I just was around and absorbing a lot of, I don't know, just interesting, not only personalities, but you know, just you know, some really terrific theater at you know, for a high school theater program. And so I kind of got the bug, and so I by, you know, fall of what was my freshman year in college, I had enrolled at the University of Houston, really on reputation alone. It had a storied you know, history at that point. And so I, kind of being somewhat aimless and not sure what I actually wanted to do, this was kind of a thing I did on the, just, you know, well, I'm going to go to college. I just didn't know what I wanted to do there. And so I joined the theater department, and you know, just started learning as much as I could, and auditioning for everything, and occasionally getting cast in, you know, either main stage shows or, you know, what we would call smaller laboratory shows. And that's just where it kind of settled in for me. I had the privilege of working under some terrific acting teachers, Carolyn Boone, who, you know, was just, she was well connected with Cecil Pickett, who had been kind of the guru of that acting program throughout the, you know, 70s and into the early mid 80s. But also Sidney Berger, who taught Shakespeare, and then later on Jose Quintero, who was this amazing theater director and acting teacher. He was one of the founders of Circle in the Square Theater in New York, and had just brought such a wealth of insight and into the work. So that's kind of where I got started, and much later on, I was doing Houston theater. Eventually, I got attracted the attention of a local anime, you know, producer. They were this mom and pop little organization that were, you know, buying. I always just jokingly say, like, pallets of anime from Japan, but really, you know, the licensing that they would do when no one was really watching anime in the United States except for a hardcore group of, you know, fans. And so, but they had this idea to license these obscure titles from Japan that no one was watching, and package them for an English-speaking North American audience. And so they would do the dubs and the subtitles and give it a really slick, new-looking, you know, package. And that company was called AD Vision. They went on to become ADV Films, and that's when I joined in with them. And now you know them as Sentai Filmworks, but they were kind of one of the originators of the idea of you know, anime distribution.
Right.
If you walked into a Blockbuster in, you know, the mid to late 90s or early aughts, before they started shutting down, and you went to the kind of animation section, you would find a whole section of anime. A good chunk of it was ADV Films titles. And you know, a lot of people think about Funimation and Dragon Ball, but you know, Funimation's big thing was Dragon Ball, and that was kind of it originally.
Right.
And they were gangbusters out of the gate because they got a distribution deal right off the bat, and they landed that thing on Cartoon Network. So you had a whole generation of youngsters growing up watching Dragon Ball and kind of opening their minds to anime.
Yes.
Thanks to what, you know, Gen Fukunaga was doing with at that time with Funimation. So but anyway, that's a weird long way to answer your question. How did I get started? I really just started out to be a stage guy. That's what was my primary ambition. And then later on, anime was just kind of a side gig while I was doing other voiceover work. And I was really kind of aiming to try to figure out how to do film and television.
Okay.
And anime was just something that was always there as a, you know, as a job. If I was doing nothing else, I was probably going in a couple hours a week at least, recording voices for anime. And here we are 25-ish years later, and I'm still doing it.
Well, I mean, it's become it's huge in the United States now, you know, especially I was talking to my son, and he was saying that at his school, you know, it's almost uncool if you don't watch anime.
It's so
you know,
weird. It's completely the opposite of the way it was.
Exactly.
Completely the opposite.
Yeah.
And you know, anime was just like, it was almost like the repository of a fan base for kids that didn't fit in anywhere else. I mean, truly.
Yeah.
And I'm not being derogatory. That was just, we discovered that very quickly. It was a very niche thing and a very niche fan base. And, you know, prior to that, there was always the occasional sort of property from overseas that would get an American, you know, dub. And it was almost just like an afterthought.
Right.
Maybe it was, you know, for who you just did it to do it. And it didn't pay very much. And and none of us thought that this was like a thing that could actually become something. But, you know, again, thanks to the work of, you know, ADV kind of seeding the fan base, and then obviously Funimation with Dragon Ball and their early stuff, it became a thing. And simultaneous to that were all of the conventions, the fan conventions. I think in some ways, I really feel like that's a huge part of where it all came together, because these fans started meeting each other. They discovered, you know, there's
other people like me.
Yeah, there are other people out there who are into this. And so, yeah, it gave it it attached a certain credibility to it that I think maybe didn't exist prior.
Right. Well, I remember I had a buddy that we would watch it together on Toonami. You know, I mean, that's where my first seeing Dragon Ball Z was probably my first interaction with anime. And yeah, I mean, Toonami brought that out into, you know, like you said, on Cartoon Network, to where, you know, you had stuff like that. You had Sailor Moon and, you know, Gundam Wing, all those things. So I'm glad that I had that. But it's funny, I was talking to a guy the other day, and now talking to people that I went to school with, and they're like, oh yeah, I love watching that. And I'm like, wait a minute, you never said anything about that when we were in school. There was a lot more people that were closet fans of it than what I even knew at the time.
Sure. Yeah. I had a feeling that it was kind of like, you know, you didn't necessarily admit you were into it.
Right.
And, you know, at the time.
Yeah.
But now you see it's all over the fashion. I mean, you know, you walk into a Hot Topic and half of that store is stocked with anime related, you know, merch. It's just, you're right. It's just everywhere. And I sort of think the uniquely American experience of what anime fandom is, it just feels different from even what probably is in Japan, where it's just been a part of the culture longer and it's sort of ubiquitous. You're not an anime fan. You're just, you know, you're a fan of a show, and it might not be animated or something. But here it's an anime fan is a certain thing, and it's a very different kind of thing. But, you know, I say that anime fan could be anybody. I did a show once where it was an odd show where, believe it or not, they had an MMA match at the show.
Really?
And they were doing, like, in the same venue, they were doing like an anime tournament in the evening, and they basically just kind of combined, you know, it sounds odd, but if you think about the idea that actually a lot of fan conventions have sometimes have wrestlers, right? And they'll even have live wrestling.
Yes.
You know, but this was MMA, and this guy that I remember this guy going in and like having a match or something, but he comes up to me later, this burly dude, and he's like, oh, I'm a huge fan of Dragon Ball. Like, you know, like it just like it inspires it inspires his training, and he's not the only person I've met like this. Like there are guys that like get fit and they're not necessarily inspired by like Schwarzenegger movies. Like they're inspired by Dragon Ball, power ups, and, you know, the Tournament of Power. So know, it's an interesting phenomenon. And as a guy that's just over a certain age, I'm still figuring it out. I can talk about it, but I can't tell you that I understand it.
Right.
It's just curious, and I'm an observer. I'm participating in a certain level, but I certainly don't claim to be like a guru of anime fandom, or, you know, I can tell you exactly what it's all about, because it surprises me every day.
Well, it's actually funny that you say that. You're talking about the wrestlers and stuff. You know, as I told you before we started, I've had quite a few on my show here. And I work with a local company here that does wrestling, and they always geek out the hardest whenever I have an anime voice actor on my show. You know, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna have this dude on. They're like, really? That's so cool. You know, and they love it. Almost all of the guys that I know in wrestling that are around my age or younger are all anime fans.
I love the wrestlers. I mean, first of all, they're fantastic athletes and performers. Yeah. And, you know, they're doing it all. But, you know, I too grew up watching wrestling. It didn't extend into my adulthood at all. Yeah. But I was a big Mid-South wrestling fan. You may have been as well, if you grew up in Arkansas. I mean, like that was on every Saturday. And in Houston, we had Houston wrestling, which was its own pocket of Mid-South wrestling. So it was a lot of the same wrestlers. And so for like an hour and a half every Saturday night, I would watch wrestling. And then Sunday morning, I would watch the rebroadcast. That's how much I was into it. But it was a lot of fun, because at a recent, actually it's been a couple of years, but as I was at a convention somewhere in the Southeast, and one of the guests was Jim Dugan. And, of course, I watched Hacksaw Dugan as a kid. You know, but I'm old enough that I remember when he started, and he was like a baby face. Yeah. I remember him being like this clean cut, crisp, you know, they kind of played up his, you know, being an All-American, right, like Oklahoma or something. That's where he played football. And then eventually he kind of turned heel, but then he was a good guy heel. Anyway, super great personality. One of the nicest guys I've ever met. Ended up having dinner with him and his wife, who he adores, and she follows him around to all the shows. And that guy was so full of stories. I could have sat and listened to him all night. And of course, it was a lot of, you know, about you know, Junkyard Dog, who I was a huge fan of, and Kamala and Andre the Giant. So yeah, he seemed happy to be there. So
that's cool. Yeah. I actually got to meet him last year at a con, and he was so nice. I mean, that was probably one of the highlights of the con for me. Yeah. And then yesterday I got to meet Jimmy Hart.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So got to meet the Mouth of the South.
These guys are great. And there's another guy who does a podcast, at least he did for a while, or maybe it was maybe it was a cable show. The guy that was the manager for the Midnight Express. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I cannot think of his name.
Talking about Jim Cornette?
Maybe Jim Cornette. Yeah. He did a show for a while that was like fascinating. And to have these guys on. I don't know why, but these like wrestling circuit stories are hilarious. They're heartbreaking. They're scandalous. I mean, they've got it all. You know.
Have you watched any of Dark Side of the Ring?
No, I haven't.
So I watch. It's on Hulu, but I think it's on like Vice TV or something like that. And they have some crazy stories from wrestling on there. You know, I mean, stuff that you never would have expected to happen, and you're like, wow, you know. Right. But if you like those kind of behind the scenes stories and everything from wrestlers, that would be one that I think you would enjoy checking out.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the tip.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So you grew up in Arkansas.
Split time between Arkansas
split time.
And Houston, Texas. Yeah.
Okay. And you said at your high school you did the acting and the drama classes and things like that. Did they have the forensic tournaments back then? Because whenever I was in high school, we had the forensic tournaments where we go to different high schools and we compete, with doing duets and, improv and all that stuff.
They did, and I was just not into it. Like I don't know why. I wasn't really introduced to it, and I was. I hate to say I was an athlete, but I participated in athletics. I was on the sports teams. I was on football. I think track and basketball occasionally. A couple times. Between working and just trying to stay above the middle of my class. I was not a great student. I was, I don't know. I was sort of, that was my thing in high school, is that I just didn't have that focus.
Right.
And I think now we understand more things about like ADHD and all these other factors that kind of affect us. But for me, it didn't come together until I got to college. And so, I would say, high school was kind of a soft launch, but of course had I to do it all over again and understand then what I know now, I think I would have absolutely embraced more of those opportunities, because our high school had them. They did it all. And, so a lot of the kids that were in drama were also doing forensics and debate, not to mention choir and a lot of the other more performance related creative outlets that make them who they are.
Right. Yeah.
Hey there, podcast listener. You enjoying what you're listening to? Well then, do I got a special treat for you. Story time with Cosplay Dude 637. That's me. I'm your host, and I like to tell you stories. Stories that I personally enjoy. So, buckle up, get comfortable, because we're going on a wild ride.
So we'll kind of switch over here just a little bit. Sure. So you got into voice acting, it sounds like pretty early on in your career and everything. When did you start? When did you switch over and start doing film and television?
Well, for me, it was never it was never really an intentional. I don't know how to say that. It was never a switch like, hey, I'm just going to flip a switch. But in a certain sense, there is an aspect of that because you go from doing a lot of theater, and then eventually you get an opportunity to audition for film and television.
Right.
And you get it, at some point you get it, you get cast in something, and it's usually your first job is just a day player on something.
Yeah.
But you realize I'm castable, and this is lucrative if I can do a lot of it.
Right.
And also at least in like union feature film and television, if you work enough, you can qualify for their health insurance plan. So as a young guy with a family, by the time I was 27, I was married and I had, kids on the way. And so it became the idea of kind of shifting a bit from theater to film and television made sense.
Right.
And so I did. And the shift really for me just meant I'm going to focus my attention on film and television, and I'm also going to stop auditioning for theater. I'm going to have to start turning it down.
Yeah.
Because those offers would come in, or those auditions would come in, and you're basically blocking out 2 months of your life to devote to this thing. And it's not like you can just shift in and out of it easily. Because theater requires a significant amount of rehearsal, and then the commitment of the run, which is typically 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks.
Right.
So that was a tough decision, because I loved it and I wanted to keep doing it, but at the time I was sort of captivated by the idea. And at the time, Texas was exporting a lot of talent. We had a lot of things happening in Texas. We had Robert Rodriguez studio, which was just kind of becoming a thing.
Yeah.
You had Richard Linklater doing his thing. You had Mike Judge. You had, but you also had productions that were happening here.
Right.
And then you had places like New Orleans, Shreveport. You had New Mexico with Albuquerque. And these places were also trying to make film, but they didn't have a lot of homegrown acting talent or even crew for that matter. So it was not uncommon for Texas actors and crew to go out of state for a production. And I would get auditions all the time in Texas for shows shooting in New Mexico and Louisiana and elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so if you look at a lot of my early film and television work, it's projects that shot in those areas, not just Texas.
Okay.
And occasionally other places. I did One Tree Hill, which shot in North Carolina. I did Nashville, which shot in Nashville.
Right.
And this was all before Georgia started coming on. The first thing I ever did in Georgia was The Walking Dead.
Oh.
But it was, Atlanta. Atlanta's always been a strong town for actors and acting. So it's no surprise that they were able to kind of contain what they were doing for a while with their own acting talent. But Texas had Texas actors got a lot of work outside of Texas back in those days. So,
well, from what I hear, I haven't heard much more about it, but at one time I heard that a lot of like the stuff in Hollywood was kind of migrating its way towards Texas. And I've heard that we're probably going to see even more of that happening in the future.
Well, I think because Texas, I think recently, and I don't have all the numbers or the rules around it, but they just approved within like our last legislative session, they approved a big new package of incentives.
Yeah.
So that they can better compete with some of our neighboring states, which have a terrific incentives package. What Georgia did is they got in on the game early on, and it was so good that they started, people started building infrastructure there. So there are actually studios, physical studios, Lakewood, I think that's the name of it. Pinewood Studios, which has a sister facility in the UK, but they're the ones that typically do all the Marvel films. And so they have a real deal grown up film industry in Georgia. And it's just funny to think about because 30 years ago, it looked like Texas would really have a strong shot at being that.
Yeah.
And, but the incentives kind of changed the game completely.
Right. So you brought something up a minute ago, and it was something I wanted to talk to you about. So when The Walking Dead, you came in, I think it was about, what was it, season 5 when you came in on there?
Season 5, yeah.
Season 5.
Right.
And you said that was your first time doing any work in Georgia. What was it like coming into a show that was already such a huge hit?
Yeah, I had auditioned several times before. I think I had auditioned for, and when I say audition, I just mean read for.
Yeah.
I'm not serious consideration, but I think I read for Merle at one point.
Okay.
I also read for Otis at one point. You remember Otis from season, I don't know,
season 2.
Yeah. So it wasn't my first time reading for the show. It still was a juggernaut, coming into season 5.
Right.
And, most all of us aspired to get on that show.
Yeah.
First of all, just because it was, you obviously you want to work, but it was a worldwide phenomenon.
Yes.
And so coming onto the show, finally getting cast, it felt like, it's hard, you kind of feel like you've arrived a little bit. After having done so many other things that kind of lead up to that. Because also it's, as an actor starting out, you typically start out doing day player roles, one-liners, or a character that just appears in one scene.
Right.
And you kind of hope to graduate up to like network shows. That matters a lot less now, but it used to be a big deal to be on a show like on ABC or NBC or CBS, right?
Right.
And you hope that you get a role that's kind of a bigger role, right? And then you hope that you get a role that maybe reappears, so you're recurring,
yes,
maybe once or twice in a season. These are all steps in an actor's career. You always start at the bottom, and by that time, I actually had a couple of recurring roles.
Yes,
Nashville and on a show called Revolution. but this one was kind of open-ended, and it wasn't clear whether it would be a recur that would turn into a series regular, or at least a regular recurring guest star.
Right.
For me, it became a recurring guest star.
Yes.
And it was kind of again, at the time, kind of a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so from a career standpoint, I was super excited, and getting on set for the first time, it was pretty surreal, to see in person some of these characters, because these are iconic characters by now.
Right. Yeah.
Rick is, and Andy Lincoln he's just iconic. When you see Andy Lincoln in person, you're looking at Rick.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I remember he came up to me on the first day. He kind of welcomed me and definitely made me feel right at home. And
that's cool.
I don't know. It was just the beginning of a really cool couple of year period of time in my life and in my career, when I kind of felt like I had a regular job, which was fantastic. And
yeah,
and it was a bunch of people that I really enjoyed. And Walking Dead had the cast mix was very interesting, because you did have sort of big stars like Andy Lincoln
mm-hmm.
on the show, but you also had a pretty good stock of, very well regarded regional actors. So what I mean by that is actors who are not necessarily LA based,
right,
but who are very strong actors in any case,
mm-hmm.
and have worked a lot regionally, much as I had. And so it was really a lot of fun to rub elbows with those folks, and to get to know them and meet them. Some of whom I still, have occasional contact with. Anne Mahoney, who's played Olivia, she's still based out of New Orleans, her hometown, but
yeah,
she surfaces from time to time. And Kenrick Green, who was a really good dude, and all those guys, Ross, but a lot of us started out, we were not necessarily LA or New York based.
Right.
We did on the show. Many of the lead cast, if you think about Melissa McBride, not
mm-hmm.
an LA based actor,
right?
She was Atlanta based. I think the story was that I heard was just that she had gotten more into casting by the time Walking Dead came around, and apparently Frank Darabont wanted to work with her because he'd worked with her on The Mist, I think, and so kind of called her out of what she was doing. But again, another sort of regional, strong regional actor who kind of became something by virtue of the show.
Yeah, you said that you didn't know at first, how this was going to turn out, and then you ended up being a reoccurring character on there. When did you find out how your character was going to end on the show?
Oh, that's a good question. I thought you were going to ask, how did I find out? Like when did, because what I was thinking is, like, when did I find out when, that my character was going to not die immediately?
Right. Yeah.
My sense was from the comic book that this was a guy that's going to last maybe 3 to 6 episodes. So going in, I thought, hey, I'm going to get 3 to 6 episodes out of this. This is great. I ended up getting 25 episodes out.
Exactly.
So the first part of that, which is the question you didn't ask, is kind of like, when did I realize this could go on for a while? And honestly, there's a very specific spot where my character should have died. Uh-huh. It's in I think midway maybe through season 6, when the tower falls on the wall, and there's the zombie kind of invasion of Alexandria that all the Alexandrians have to band together to fight off. And there's a scene that you may recall where Tobin is sort of rescued from the debris of the tower. I think Rose and another character, they kind of grab me off the ground where I'm bleeding.
Right.
Anyway, that in the comic book, that's where Tobin dies. He dies in that.
Okay.
In that event. And so by the end of the shooting of that, I'm thinking to myself, I'm still alive. And I was never such an important actor on the show that, like, I had like a season contract where I knew exactly how many episodes I was going to do anyway.
Right.
So everything was always kind of show to show.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, season 8, I think, is when Tobin met his demise. And I was actually, oddly enough, I had gone to where my wife was having lunch. She called me and it was like, my tire's flat. And I'm like, I'll come change your tire. and I'm changing the tire on the minivan, and my phone rings, and I look down, and it's Scott, the showrunner, and I immediately knew, oh, I'm dead, because the courtesy that is given to actors who've been on the show for a while, who are going to die, is that they get notified before the script goes out to the rest of the cast and crew. And so it was the draft came out that preceded, shooting that episode, which happened, I think, 2 weeks after that. And he just let me know, how much my work was appreciated on the show. It was a very sincere call. It wasn't BS, but he was kind of letting me know that, like, hey, it's going to happen. And I was like, yeah, thanks. We had a nice conversation, and I couldn't have been more pleased with the way Tobin was sent off. It was exactly like I'd always hoped.
Yeah.
I said, I hope he dies with his boots on, and he goes out fighting.
Yeah.
And not only did I get to, spend that episode fighting, but I thought Tobin got a pretty nice Walker turn.
Yes.
And got a little rampage, and very reminiscent intentionally of classic Frankenstein, and before kind of meeting his final demise at the hands of who else but Melissa McBride. So it was very perfect and fitting in for the character, and surrounded frankly by, like, Andy Lincoln was in the room, and Norman Reedus was in the room, and it was very cool. So
that is cool. So playing a zombie, I'm guessing that's the first time you've ever done that. What kind of direction do they give you to be like, okay, how does that go about?
Yeah, I mean, for the first half of the shooting for that show, the first couple of days, I'm still living, so it was all very normal. And then once those once that part of it was done for me, and I had to shift into zombie mode, I even, they send you to a completely different makeup trailer where they do special effects makeup. For me, obviously, Tobin was fresh.
Yeah.
So there was no decay.
Right.
You just had to see, like, change of skin color. And most notably, the thing that they do with the eyeballs, which is crazy. And those are really heavy colored contacts. That, depending on the scene, they're either going to completely cover your eye, or they're going to have one that's got a little tiny hole in the middle so you can kind of see what you're doing. Depending on the needs of the camera, if it's a close-up or not. And you just improvise it. I understand that the background actors who play zombies have to go through some kind of a training, but for me, it was just like, you just do it, and you do what makes sense, and so we did, and the actions were very important because it was a lot of close-ups, it was a lot of terror, right? People waking up in the middle of the night because they heard a noise, and suddenly Tobin is, like, tearing into your flesh. And so there was some cool special effects stuff where I had to bite through someone's, I don't know, neck, and like, pulsing blood would be gushing out, and truly that's, like, connected to a pump, and there's somebody just off camera, like, pumping the blood so that it spurts out. And
oh wow,
so, a lot of fun. I mean, honestly, like,
did they get it all in one take?
Well, we did. Some of those things did happen in one take. Obviously, we typically do multiple takes of any given thing,
right?
But when you do a close-up of a special effects shot, you're really hoping to get that
right
in one take. Because you're going to be cutting away from that and into it, and as long as you get a good second and a half of teeth rending flesh,
right,
you've got something to work with. So
I mean, Walking Dead, I was on the couch for the very first episode when it aired, and I've loved so much of it. I actually, whenever you said that you tell me that you would be on here and everything like that, I went back and started rewatching the show, just a refresher, because it's been a minute since I watched it, but man, that show still holds up. It's so good.
Yeah, the quality was always there, even if, you had fans and critics sometimes complaining about the strengths of, different episodes, but every episode was really, I think, lovingly assembled, from the writing to the production team, the crafts people that work in the different departments, whether it's art department, special effects. And that's one of the things that I miss the most about being on the show, is just being around so many people that are so good at what they do, and giving that attention to every scene, the lighting, the camera angles. I mean, all these guys they're artisans, every one of them. And you can see that in the show. You can see that attention to detail. So that was really cool.
So you've done lots of different shows. In fact, going through your IMDb, I'm going to use a wrestling analogy here whenever I say this, but I was talking to my wife and I was like, I popped whenever I saw all the different stuff that you had been in, and like I loved Into the West, and I saw that you were on that, and then you were in Preacher, you were in Fullmetal Alchemist, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. And I was sitting there just talking to her. I was like, oh my God, he was in this and this, so you've had an amazing career. What would you say is probably one of your favorite characters that you've played?
Wow. That's really good. I tend to think less of characters than I do of like my experience working on something.
Yes.
As far as characters recently, and I still talk about this just because not only did I love the writing, but it was also a great experience. It was an independent film that I did here in Texas called Two Step. And this film is available via Apple, I think. But it was made by a filmmaker out of Brooklyn who had been living in Texas, working in Austin for a couple of years at that point. And he had really gotten I think he'd gotten where he'd understood the Texas vibe, if you will. And he just had a crazy idea for a film based on some old fears that he had around home invasions. And he had seen a story about the grandparents scam where, somebody will call old people and pretend to be their grandchildren, and they'll end up, scamming them out of thousands of dollars.
Oh man.
And so he created a scenario that became this kind of slow burn Texas crime thriller. And it's really terrific, and I recommend it. But I played Dwayne, kind of a local crime boss, and just some really fine writing and some terrific acting. I love doing independent film. Recently I've been working with some guys here in North Texas who are independent filmmakers, and there's just something about working on a small set with really hungry, not only actors, but the filmmakers too are just really trying to knock it out of the park on a limited budget. And there's something very raw and real about that. But other things I've been a part of that I had a great time. Interestingly enough, there's a sci-fi show called The Lost Room. It was actually one of those early projects of mine when I first started working out of state. Shot in Albuquerque with Kevin Pollak, among others. But it's a really great sci-fi piece. And I was in. Originally, it was shot as a 3-film miniseries, and I think they ended up breaking up into like 6 1-hour episodes. But that was a lot of fun. I got to do one of the Librarian films, if you remember the Noah Wiley series, that shot in New Orleans. That was a lot of fun because I was on that for about a month and a half. So that was fun. I've had some fun. I got to spend a day on No Country for Old Men, working with the Coen brothers and Josh Brolin. It's tiny role, day player role, but man, what an experience! My first film right out of the gate when I started working and focusing on film and television was a show called Secondhand Lions. And if you got kids, you've probably seen it. And if you haven't, I definitely recommend it. About a young Haley Joel Osment at the time. He was, this was after Sixth Sense and after AI, and he was on the cusp. He was still maybe, I don't know, I'd say 12, 13, 14, not quite an adult yet. And he plays this 10, 11-year-old kid that goes to stay with his crazy uncles for the summer. And Robert Duvall, Michael Caine. So I'm working with all those guys.
Star-studded cast there.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, for sure. And written and directed, by the way, by Tim McCanless, who is probably best known for writing and directing The Iron Giant. So
okay.
So if you that vibe, that kind of writing, that kind of something really just heartfelt and Spielbergian about, if you remember The Iron Giant, a lot of that is true of Secondhand Lions as well. So you could ask me that about anime, and I've done so many hundreds of titles. Obviously Beerus, I'm having a great time voicing Beerus the Destroyer.
Yes.
Who just doesn't quit. It's interesting, they keep coming out with Dragon Ball content. One the fans really want is a continuation of Dragon Ball Super, but it looks like we're going to get a different kind of series coming up.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure what that's going to be about or how it's going to affect, obviously my characters. But even within the last month, I'm voicing Beerus for 2 different video games. So that stuff continues to work.
Well, yeah, aren't they? Is it a new Budokai that they're coming out with?
That's
I think
Budokai Tenkaichi, and the name of it is like Spark. I've been calling it Sparkle Vision, which is terrible. It is something like that, but yeah, it is a continuation of the Budokai Tenkaichi series of games, and it's gangbusters. I mean, there's like almost every character from Dragon Ball universe is in the game and playable.
Yeah,
so it's extremely ambitious. But
I've really been enjoying. I do a lot of gameplay on the Switch, and I've really been enjoying still Xenoverse 2.
Yep,
that one has been a ton of fun to play. I still haven't beaten it because there's a lot to do on that. But you were involved with that one as well, weren't you?
Yeah, Xenoverse. I want to say Xenoverse might have actually been the introduction of Beerus.
Yeah,
very low key.
And
I almost, I'm just trying to remember when I last did Beerus for that game. But I know initially when I went in and do Beerus for that game, we hadn't even done Battle of the Gods yet.
Right.
So yeah, as far as like building a character and kind of knowing where he was coming from and how to do it. I imagine that it's a lot like watching those early Tracy Ullman episodes of The Simpsons, where it's the same actors, but they sound very different. Because they hadn't locked in the voice yet. So.
Right. So yeah, Beerus, that's been I've really enjoyed that character a lot. In fact, as soon as I could, I've got a big statue of Beerus out in my garage and everything in my podcast area. So where do you draw inspiration from whenever you came up with the voice for Beerus?
Well, first of all, he's a cat, so let's just establish that right up front.
Yeah,
I felt like we needed something that was sort of feline without being feminine, because there wasn't. I just like what I mean by that is just he had that something sensual, and smooth and confident about him, but he also just reminded me of this kind of old soldier, this sort of crusty curmudgeon general type. And he also had this aspect of royalty, of regality. So I'm like, how do we work all that in? Obviously, I'm listening a little bit to what our Japanese voice actor had done with it, but I'm not trying to imitate that performance.
Right.
But I am using it a little bit as a launching pad.
Yeah.
And I just started kind of playing with my own voice and kind of throat and kind of what does it sound like to be, sort of confident. But I had this idea of a kind of a slightly British, villain, where he's, he doesn't want to be, bothered with niceties or this kind of but I didn't want him to have a British accent either. I think I experimented with that, but I kind of pulled back from it to go a little bit more mid-Atlantic, a little more smart sounding.
Yeah.
But all of that is to say that ultimately there's a gut instinct that you have, I think, at least for me, with characters. And so I try to just build that in and then just let the voice kind of speak and just see what happens from scene to scene, especially as we're building it. And Battle of Gods was great because it gives us this huge kind of opening scene with Beerus and Weiss, where Beerus is sort of waking up and he's going through his routine, and it's all very feline.
Yeah.
But he's also, feasting, and he's sort of barking out orders to Weiss, but he's secure, So it was really a gift because not only for me as the actor, but for the audience, that we really got an introduction to that character.
Yes.
It established the baseline for what and who this character is, and that's where Beerus was created. It was in that scene and just kind of going through it over and over again until we got it right, and everything else has kind of springs from that. And it's it's the one character that I can do, frankly, without having to hear a reference. Typically, when you go in to record and it's a character that you've done previously, they'll offer to play you a reference, file, just so you can get it back in your head.
Yeah.
And but I don't really ever need that with Beerus. He just kind of rides along with me no matter where I go.
Well, see, people can't see this, but I can see you on video here and everything, and I can just see like your demeanor almost changes as you're doing the voice. I can see you're rubbing the hands together,
Sure.
And I can see it just comes right out, and it's really cool to be able to see that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a character that I definitely feel in my body when I'm voicing it. And,
right.
Fans really love. There's I'm sure you've seen it. It's at least on YouTube. It's a video that was assembled of Sean and I doing scenes from Battle of the Gods. And it's kind of cool because they've got kind of a split screen with both of us. There's a small insert shot of us in the booth doing these characters, or vice versa. But in any case, it's Sean and I. It's the scene from Battle of Gods, the big battle between Goku and Beerus. But Sean and I are also on screen in the booth doing the voices, and you can see how animated we get. You just kind of getting into it. It really feels like we're in the battle ourselves. And, but yeah, it's a lot of fun, and the fans really dig that. So. But yeah, I think when you feel a character, especially when you've been doing it for a long time, it just can't help but kind of affect your demeanor. And frankly, it helps. It actually helps to like adjust your posture,
right?
According to whatever your type of character you're playing.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I apologize for butting in on what you're listening to, but I wanted to introduce you guys to a brand new podcast called the Tiger Nexus Podcast. I'm Tiger, and I'm the host. I'm mostly known for the Tiger Tales YouTube channels, where you'll find stories and fan fictions that I write and read to you guys. I'm also a co-founder of the Three Range Bro Studios, but I wanted to dive into this whole podcasting thing. I'm a content creator, and I adore making content of all sorts of varieties, and I want to interview people that enjoy and make content as well. And we're talking about all sorts of things, from TikToks to YouTube to story writing to storytelling, podcasts, movies and TV shows, all forms of content you can think of. I want to interview people about. So there's going to be lots of different variety. So make sure you check out the Tiger Nexus Podcast on YouTube and Spotify.
So nothing on your level of voice acting, but I've done a little bit. I have some podcasts that I work with that make their own stories, and they put them out on YouTube and places like that. And I've done some voice acting for them, and I'm trying to find new ways to produce these new voices and things that I
Yeah.
need to do to, make each character unique and everything.
Right.
So with saying that, do you have any advice for somebody who maybe is just starting out doing voice acting?
Yeah. It's a good question. It's one that we get increasingly a lot.
Yeah.
And because to be honest with you, 20, 30 years ago, it's not a question people were asking. Nobody was saying, how can I be a voice actor? Very few people were.
Right.
Because typically your voice actors were just actors, and they were actors who were doing voice acting as a side gig or as part of the gig, right?
Yes.
They were just, particularly you signed regionally, you signed with an agent somewhere, and, they're going to send you out on, auditions for local commercials and industrial films and voiceover jobs, a local radio commercial. So you have actors doing that kind of work as a voice actor. And then you also have guys coming out of like more professional radio type situations where they're already, working on mic, and so they're coming into it from that angle. And then of course you have stand-up comics and other, entertainment industry types who are getting hired or going after whatever the work is.
Right.
So all I can tell you, and is the same as I tell a lot of actors, is like I tell people, get in a class. If you haven't taken an acting class, and I'm biased because I'm an actor who took a lot of classes, and I always feel like, have respect for the craft.
Yes.
It is a craft, and there is so much that I do without thinking too much about it, but that I do it because I learned it the hard way. Like I went to acting class. I did scene work with other actors. I memorized, scenes from plays, and then I got up in front of people and performed them.
Yeah.
I went and took, I went and studied improv. Like I studied improv with a guy named David Hickox down in Houston. And then I came up to North Texas, and I went to study improv at 4-Day Weekend. And I've always had, a strong interest in improv, but I've always, felt like it was a great way to impact my work as an actor. And so I just try to tell people, do the work, be willing to do the work. Sometimes I get more specific if if you were going to say, hey, can we have a consultation? And I'm going to tell you what my goals are. And I would, and we'll kind of feed off of each other.
Yeah.
Then I would ask you more questions. I wouldn't just say, here's some advice, because in order to give you good advice, I need to kind of know where you've been, what are you doing now, and where do you want to go?
Right.
What kind of experience have you had? What is your current thing? And what do you really want to do? Because some people just want to do audiobooks. Some people are really interested in that sort of commercial, industrial voiceover world, and why shouldn't they be? That's where the money is. Some people just came up because they were fans of anime.
Yeah.
And they were fans of anime, and then they maybe attended a convention or two and met a couple of voice actors in person. And then decided, I think I want to do that too.
Right.
So everybody comes at it from a different angle, and it's really helpful to know what your angle is. If I talk to somebody who is a master's student, graduate at SMU studying, acting, I know that person has a strong performance background, and probably could slide right into a voiceover job without much more training. And also, they've invested in a career. I know that person is they're going to be acting no matter what.
Yes.
If it's someone who, just like has maybe they've done a fan dub, maybe their friends told them they have a cool voice, and they do an impression of Goku, they do an impression of Beerus.
Yeah.
And they think that they want to make money doing it, but that's all they've done. For that person, it's a completely different conversation.
Right.
Because a lot of times those folks don't have a realistic outlook about what an acting career truly entails. And it entails a lot of difficulty.
Yeah.
It entails a lot of disappointment. It entails needing a lot of perseverance, because you really do have to get out there and prove yourself, and no one feels obligated to hire you, and
Right.
nobody owes you a job just by virtue of anything.
Right.
And so, and there's no certificate or degree that you show up with that somebody goes, oh yeah, you've got a degree, therefore you're good. You still have to audition.
Right.
And it's still about, no matter what you've done, it's still about showing up and being a professional, and also being the one that they're looking for.
Right.
And that takes a lot of just balls. It really does. It takes a lot of chutzpah, right, to show up and be like, I'm not here just because I'm hoping you'll hire me. I'm here because I think I'm the right guy. Like I think you're stupid not to hire somebody else, because I'm clearly the right guy for this job.
Right.
And then not get hired, right? Like 9 times out of 10 or 19 times out of 20, you don't get hired anyway, and you still have to maintain a certain level of confidence and professionalism in what you do. So man, as far as advice, I would just say very generically, like, take it seriously if you really are thinking about doing it. And I think a lot of people are looking for shortcuts. I've had people that are just like, implicitly, they just want to know, what website do I go to find out, where do I sign up for the auditions, for Crunchyroll. It's like, man, like you're not there yet. You might think you are because you watched a YouTube video and you went out and you bought a microphone that you probably shouldn't have spent that much money on. But just because you have a piece of equipment doesn't mean you're ready to be a professional.
Right.
And so every once in a while you'll have somebody that's clearly gifted. And okay, let me show you the way, because like clearly you've got it and you're not going anywhere.
Right.
And so, but that's rare. Most of us have to work at it. And I think if somebody's really going to say, hey, voiceover career, do the work. And by the way, you don't have to ask me. There's a ton of resources out there, people that'll tell you. I'm happy to talk with anybody about it, but there are way more resources online than there were 20 years ago about how to be a voice actor. And there are guys there are a lot of free resources. There are very good books that have been written on the subject. And there are some guys that will charge you $1,000 or $10,000 for a year's worth of advice.
Yeah.
I've seen these online.
Wow.
A lot of these guys have, they have really good little whatever show they're doing.
Yeah.
But they're sandbagging because they want you to buy their $10,000 course on how to really make it. And I don't know, maybe they're great. But man, before you drop that investment, I feel like that's the final mile of the marathon.
Yeah.
Really, I feel like you should make sure that you've got the chops. And that means you can take a copy, having never seen it before in some circumstances, and read it and figure out what the producer wants and do it and be great at it. And I don't think that just comes from an overnight thing. I don't think that's luck.
Yeah.
I think you got to be a good reader. You got to be able to look at and interpret a script for tone, for context. You can't just start reading words off a page. You got to know why those words are there in the first place. What came before these words? What question do these words answer? In the case of commercial copy, there's always a question before that you don't hear.
Yeah.
The commercial copy, when you're listening to the radio or watching TV and you see an ad, that ad is written to scratch an itch that they think that the viewer has.
Right.
So, all of that takes a little nuance and like kind of understanding. So I would, I just think you got to have a healthy attitude about what it means to do this, because
definitely
certain commitment to acting that really does exclude certain things in life. And when I first started getting into it, and I'm talking early days, like theater days, even the theater teachers would tell you, look, if there's anything that you can do in this life that you can do and you can enjoy it, go do it. Don't be an actor. Like it is often so thankless. It leads to it can lead to people's ruin
Mm-hmm.
if they don't have the right attitude for it, or if they don't have the right character disposition. Sudden success, if you're even lucky to have it, can lead to really stupid decisions that some people make. You look at actors who are very famous and very screwed up,
Right.
all the time.
Yep.
Success and fame and money does not bring happiness, and
Right.
And it can bring you some fun times, but I have a hard time like encouraging young people to like do this, because it is a difficult thing. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, we're coming up close to a close on here. I've got maybe just a few more questions I want to ask you, and then we'll get you off of here. Do you have any hobbies?
When you've got a house full of kids, that's your hobby, I think.
I feel that.
I've been a Cub Scouts den leader. I've been a Boy Scouts volunteer. I've been a volunteer baseball, little league baseball coach. I think when I'm here at home, I enjoy working in my yard. Just basic outdoor stuff.
Yeah.
I like camping with the kids. I do love. I like music. My wife and I like going to see live music from time to time. I've got interests, but for me, it's been focused around raising our kids. So,
yeah.
Everything that goes along with that.
What kind of music do you like?
Man, I like everything from like indie to classic rock to jazz.
Okay.
I've been on a jazz run lately, and I looked at my Spotify yesterday, and all of my daily mixes were nothing but different jazz combinations. But I was like, man, this is weird. I'm a guy that also like I like everything from gosh, I was listening to The Smile this morning, the Tom York project outside of Radiohead. My son is a musician, my oldest son, and he's really into like EDM electronic stuff. So that kind of reawakened my old interest in like early 80s techno pop stuff.
Yeah.
Pretty eclectic tastes. Almost anything but whatever mainstream radio's playing. Like I just don't even listen to that. But
I got you.
Indie bands, any kind of smaller band, I just like the originality of it. And I guess I don't kind of ease into my old listening habits as much as I might have thought I would. And I mean, classically, I love Led Zeppelin. I love Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
I love anything old and kind of proggy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Proggy stuff, prog metal.
Yeah.
I was very much into Metallica and Queensryche and Anthrax and Megadeth when I was in high school.
There you go.
I still have, like, if that stuff comes on, sometimes I'll turn it up, but I'm just as likely these days to be listening to like some Belgian jazz.
Belgian jazz. I don't think I've ever listened to any Belgian jazz.
Very cool stuff coming out of Amsterdam these days, my friend.
Okay, I might have to give that a listen when we get off of here.
Yeah. Think like Mogwai or Explosions in the Sky, but a little more experimental.
Okay.
So.
All right. Do you have any current projects that you're working on that maybe you can tell me about?
I'm just sort of waiting for a cool little Western. Earlier I was talking North Texas and indie film. There was one called Harsh Treatment that I did about a year ago, and I think we're expecting it to come out. But it's a Western, and we shot it in North Texas here in the extreme far reaches of the Dallas Fort Worth area, and that should be a good one. And then in the spring, believe it or not, I am going back to the theater, and I will be doing a show in Dallas with a theater here, and so I'm excited to get back into that. I don't know that it's a move so much as a kind of a stopover.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hearing you talk, the stage acting never really gets out of your blood and everything. I can tell that you have a passion for that. So, you got to keep with your passions as well.
For sure. Yeah. It kind of reminds you of why you started in the first place.
Exactly.
It's really easy doing this job after many years to kind of view it as the job, and it's your job and it's work.
Right.
But I think you can begin to lose your edge a little bit when it becomes the job every day. And so much that is rewarding about this career really are those moments of creative inspiration, those moments of when you're just working on a project with really great people, and you feel inspired, and you're feeling creative, and you feel like you're contributing to something meaningful,
right?
And that happens a lot in theater, and it often happens in film and television, but not always.
Yeah.
And really a lot of times you are showing up for a shoot on something that it's going to be a slog, and you're just there, and you should be giving it your best, but at the end of the day, you're collecting a paycheck. I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but that is a lot of times the work feels like that.
Yeah.
And you got to take the heights with the troughs,
right.
And that's just life. And so yeah, it's good to get back to your roots and to think about why you started doing it in the first place.
Yeah. So. Well, man, it has been great talking to you. If you could tell everybody where they can follow you if they want to follow you online.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a Facebook page, Jason Douglas Fans, I think is what it's called, or Jason Douglas Actor. I'm also on Twitter /X as Mr. Jason Douglas. The easiest thing is probably, because I'm on IG, I'm on all these places, but the easiest thing I think to do is find my Linktree. And I'm also on Linktree as Mr. Jason Douglas. And if you pull that up, you're going to not only see where you can connect with me, but I also try to keep it updated with a list of my appearances. So I have quite a few appearances already booked, for this year. I'm going to be in Florida 3 times. I'm going to be in Jacksonville in March. I'm going to be in Oklahoma City for a big anime show at the end of this month. But I've got shows in Providence, Rhode Island. So I'm going to be all over. And you'll see that on the Linktree, and you can follow the links to buy tickets or to, ask questions, etc. So.
All right, man. Do you have any final thoughts for me before I get you off of here?
No, man, this is great. I'm feels honored to be on here, and I hope I wasn't too boring today. I hope we had some.
Oh no, not at all.
That your audience will be interested in, but yeah, it's been a weird career for me, and it's kind of fun and interesting to talk about because truly there's a lot of pockets of interest that even I'm surprised sometimes to remember, oh yeah, I did do that thing. So, but thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely, man. It was great having you on, and thank you for doing this. And hopefully I can get you back on again in the future.
You bet. Maybe when I get a big project coming up, we can talk about it.
That sounds great.
All right.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
Hey, listener. This is a not paid for product placement for the Zero to Hero podcast.
What do you mean?
If you
not
definitely
paid?
like what you're listening to now, come on over to the Zero to Hero podcast.
Lights on. Just
Anywhere you want to be able to find your podcast
the
at,
trash bills
like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, which is still a little weird.
For the next 2 weeks.
Come on over and enjoy yourself and listen to Billy and myself bicker, argue, and, fight about a lot of things, as we are the Bulk and Skull of podcasting.
How the hell am I going to
Good luck out there, and welcome back to the show.
All right, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed that episode with Jason Douglas. He was really cool to talk to, and I'm glad that I was able to bring him on the show. And I just want to say thank you to him again for taking time to be on the show, to talk with me today, and, kind of tell these amazing stories that he got to tell. And hopefully I'll be able to get him on again, maybe later this year or maybe next year or something, But I definitely want to have him back on the show to talk further about, a lot of the things that we didn't get to talk about and maybe some new projects that he's working on as well. So next week I will be having on the last guy that is part of the Three Ranger Bros Studios. As you know, I've had Willie on here, cosplayer dude 637. I've also had Ty Tiger on here. Well, now I am going to have Mark, the Red Cornish Ranger, on the podcast, and we are going to talk about his stories that he does with Nerds Through Comics and all kinds of other things that he does, how he came up with the Red Cornish Ranger character and everything. So that one's going to be a lot of fun, and I know that you guys are going to enjoy that one as well. So make sure that you tune in next week to hear that episode with Mark, the Red Cornish Ranger. And while you're waiting on a new episode of If You Give a Dad a Podcast, make sure that you check out my podcast networks, the OIW Podcast Network, the Zeo to Hero Podcast Network, and the Avenue Podcast Network. They all have amazing shows, and go out there, give them some love, listen to some of those great shows on there as well. So I do have some new merch out. You've seen me post these. I have, in fact, I'm wearing one of them right now. You can't see it, but I am wearing it, and it is my Dad Bod Club shirt that I have. It's kind of based off of something else. If you're a wrestling fan, you'll know what I'm talking about. Me and Billy from Zeo to Hero actually came up with this design, and my wife perfected it and made it what it is now, and they are for sale. If it's local, you can get them for $20. If you need it shipped to you, it'll be $25. I also have my hoodies out, which are $30 if they're local, $35 if you need it shipped to you. It has the "Hello, all my beautiful people" on the front, just in the little pocket size. And then on the back, it says, "If you give a dad a podcast." You've seen me post these. I also have my t-shirts, normal t-shirts that you can get. Plus, I can get all of those in t-shirts, long sleeve t-shirts, whatever you're needing. I can get any one of those designs done on those. So just let me know what you want. Hit me up, and you can get one of those today. Also, my wife is the one who makes them for me, so if you like what that looks like and you want her to make something for you, something custom, she can do that as well. She makes all kinds of stuff from cups to hats to t-shirts to sweaters. She does just about anything you can think of. She also does stickers. Her stickers are really amazing. And if you guys are at the Neo Show ArtCon this weekend and you stop by, just ask me for one of the stickers. I'll be giving out free stickers for the podcast. So come by, say hi, and everything. And with saying that, I also want to talk about Original Geek Comics. Original Geeks, Nick Helms and all those guys over there. We are doing a joint project where I'm going to be doing a live episode at Neo Show ArtCon. And I will have a link later this week for you guys to be able to tune into that as well. It's something new, and it's going to be exciting, and I'm just looking forward to this. It's going to be a new chapter in the If You Give a Dad a Podcast. I have some new stuff that's coming out as well that you will be hearing about here really soon. When it comes to some of my other people, I'm doing all kinds of new stuff when it comes to this podcast and expanding my reach and expanding what I do here. But make sure that you tune in with me and Original Geek Comics when we do our live episode. I'm going to interview Nick and some of the other guys about their process when it comes to writing and it comes to creating, because some of the artists will be there as well. And then we'll be able to take some questions from the fans or from the people who were there. So if you show up, make sure you bring your questions so that we can answer those for you. I also want to say thank you to DCure for creating my ending theme song for me. If you like the way that sounds, then make sure that you go out there and follow him. All of these people that I'm mentioning right now, I will have links to them in my show notes, especially even today's guest, Jason Douglas. I have his Linktree on there, which shows all of the different places that he will be in the near future and all the different ways that you can follow him, as well as you heard me say in the last episode to go and look up his IMDb. I will have a link to that as well, so you can see all the amazing things that he's done. So you hear me talking about social media here, and if you want to follow me on that, you can just look up If You Give a Dad a Podcast on whichever social media app that you're using, and you should be able to find me. You can also look me up on Google. I should be the first 10 to 15 results there as well. If you want to send me an email, send it to giveadadapodcast@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you guys, and I can't wait to hear more from you. As you're listening to this, make sure that you go out there and rate and review this episode. Tell me what you think, whether you liked it or whether you didn't. Let me know. The more people who review this and give me a 5-star review, the more likely I am to be recommended to somebody else. If you didn't like it, that's okay too. But just let me know what you think of these episodes and how I'm doing. Also, make sure that you go out there and like, share, and subscribe to If You Give a Dad a Podcast, wherever it is you're listening. And make sure that you hit that notification bell. That way you are notified when a new episode of iGetApp drops. So, we are at the end of another episode of If You Give a Dad a Podcast. And it is time for Billy's favorite part of the episode. And that is Dad Joke of the Week. What did Beerus say to Goku about his son? Why don't you tell your son, Gohan home?
Jared's dad joke of the week? More like Jared's lame duck of the week. Oh my god, this is so bad to listen to.
All right, you guys. I love you. I hope that you have a wonderful week. And I will see you next time. Bye.
Room rounded, but I got a podcast on. He calls us beautiful people, then tells us who we have on. The best part of my day, though we're blocked out in my pods. Tell my friends all about it so that they follow along. And the host is kinda nerdy, but guess what I am as well. I don't feel so alone and I began walking out of my shell. Heard a story, I need a connection I haven't felt. I'll be looking for the next one, till then farewell. It's the podcast for me. Have it on, better go see. Listen closely, download and tune in remotely. It's the podcast for me. Have it on, better go see. And listen closely, download and tune in remotely.
This podcast is part of the OIW Podcasting Network.
Alright, cool, sweet. Baby Jesus. Okay, cool.